All right, I'm in the spray room now. You can maybe call this part 2 of a sanding prep, or whatever it takes to get your doors ready for a final finish. A proper technique, and I don't want to get into the different materials that we use to spray. Suffice it to say, I always use a primer and then a quality final coat. This particular white that I'm using, let me get the camera over here, and let's go over and I'll show you. Right now, this is the undercoater that I'm using right now, the primer. It's, this started out, it was Valspar Industrial Coatings. They changed the name to Axalta or something. This name you're seeing down here, Axalta. And now it's coming through with the Amerium name. I don't know what it is, but it's a professional pre-catalyzed lacquer. This particular is my undercoater. You can see it here. I'm sorry if I'm not getting the camera right here. Okay, it's a white undercoater. It's a primer. It's a sealer. It's a high quality. You're not going to find this in your big box stores. This is pretty much only available to the industry. Okay, so that's my primer coat, and my final coat. Again, the same name here, Axalta. All right, Valtech Premium Pre-Cat White Lacquer Sand Finish. All right, this is what I'm using for my final coats. We also get this tinted sometimes to match different colors that a client might select. I ask them just to give me a Benjamin Moore color and number, and I send out, and I buy this from a company called Richie Lou. This is where I get most of my finishes. And Richie Lou will mix up the custom colors that I need using either the white base or a clear. This one right here, this is a clear finish. Okay, pre-catalyzed water white lacquer. Depending on the color that I've selected, they will use either a clear base or a white base, all right? So this is the clear base here. This is the white base, okay? And I'm assuming that this can was, I got this one in here about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and now they're coming through with this green Amerium label. I'm told they're still the same thing. I trust my guys. And by the way, I do thin this stuff 5% with premium white or premium lacquer thinner from the same company, Axalta. All right. They say you can spray this right out of the can, these products, but I found that it works a little bit better when I thin it a little bit. I'll get a much better spray pattern when I use my Kremlin gun. This is my Kremlin gun here. All right, it's actually a AAA system made by Kremlin. It's a pump. All right, and I'm not even going to get into this. That's not the topic right now. But I found that if I take the wand, which you can see right here, that comes out of the pump, there's a hose here that picks up the material, and this is the wand with a filter. Oh, let me cheat it. I'm not good with the camera, all right? It's got a filter on the end of the wand. We put it down into the material. All right, but I found that if I spray it right from the can, all right, I get a little bit of orange peel. If I thin it out just a little bit, and there's not a lot of adjustment you could do on this gun, by the way, these AAA guns, I can control the fan a little bit here, right here with this knob. That controls the width of the fan, but mostly you're setting up your air pressure here and your fluid pressure, your material pressure, and a combination by setting those two together, you get a good fan where you're not going to get a lot of striping, a good solid fan, about a 6 to 8 inch wide fan. And that works pretty good, but unless I thin the material just a little bit, never more, 5% maximum, sometimes only 2%, all right? That's just so I get a little bit less orange peel when I'm spraying, all right? So at any rate, I've got these 5 doors here. They're the last of a bunch I've just done. Let me get this set back into the tripod. And I'm gonna let you watch me spray these, put the final coats on here. Let me see if I can get this thing properly leveled. This camera's kind of it kind of levels itself, but you gotta be really close to begin with. All right, let's see if I've got that set okay. Okay, I've already prime painted the backs of these doors. Now I'm gonna flip them over and I'm gonna spray primer on the fronts. So I'll let you see that happening, okay? This is the Amerium white undercoater that I'm spraying at this point. I don't know if I said it previously, but this company says that these finishes I use are self-sealing, so I really do not have to put a sealer or a primer coat. I could just use the finish coats, put them on, sand them down, and recoat again. I like to use the undercoater. It helps a lot with grain raise. When the first coat goes on there, it raises the grain a little bit. And I found that these undercoaters, they have enough solids in it. It's kind of like a filler almost, like a paste filler. Not thick like a paste filler, but it does have filling qualities, all right? And then when you go to sand it, it powders up real nice, okay? So I can get a much better base for my finishes than if I try to self-seal with the finish coat. So even though they tell me those are self-sealing, I tried it when I initially got started with this stuff, and I didn't like the way it sanded. It didn't powder up real nice, and it didn't have the filling qualities that the primer does. And I also don't believe that gets proper adhesion to bare wood. I feel that the primer or the undercoater, sealer, whatever you want to call it, gets a much better adhesion into the wood, bare wood, than if you go with the finish and use that as a self-sealer, okay? So, again, you've got to make sure you sand to a maximum of 150 grit prior to putting your primer coats on. And make sure you ease and break over all those edges and the corners, as I spoke about in the previous earlier part of this video. All right, everything's been wiped down with the 100% cotton rag that has been washed a zillion times, so there's no lint whatsoever in it. And then I blow it all off with an air hose, and now I'm going to come and put this primer coat on. And another thing, the primer coat, if you sand this wood too smooth of a finish, like 180, 200, 220, 300, 400 grit, whatever, that sealer is not going to bond as well with the wood. I feel it glazes it over or it burnishes or whatever, and it doesn't really bite into the wood. So by going to a 150 grit maximum, I feel the primer bonds much better. It bites into the wood, it grabs all of it, and creates a better physical bond. I'm not concerned with the bond between the finish coat and the primer, which I sand with a 240 grit sandpaper. I'm not concerned with that as much sanding with a higher grit, because there's a chemical bond between the primer and the finish. It's not so much a physical bond. I wouldn't go with a 600 or 1,000 grit and try to sand that. I think that would be going over the top a little bit. Because I don't burn it, excuse me. These are cabinets, all right? Kitchen cabinets, bath cabinets, and some furniture that I'm mostly working with. They're not like a guitar body or a piano, where after you put the finish on, you're going to come back with a multitude of a lot of different grit wheels and start polishing and sanding. You put a paste wax on and you start with coarser grits and you work your way up. You're knocking down that finish, all right? So we don't do that with our regular cabinet work. We just put this finish coat on and that's it, all right? So we want to be as smooth as possible before we put that finish coat on, but there's not much sense going up much higher than a 240 grit, because the thickness, anywhere from 1 to 3 mils of thickness of the final coat going over top of that's gonna fill in, that's gonna be more, when that settles out, that's gonna be more than enough thickness to take care of any light scratch pattern you might have that's maybe different from a 240 grit up to, say, a 4 or 600 grit. So 240 grit is all you need to sand your primers, all right? It leaves enough of a scratch pattern, you still get that physical bond, and there's supposedly an excellent chemical bond between the finished product and the primer. And to ensure that I get that good, excellent chemical bond, I stay with the same company. I'm not going to put a Sherwin-Williams primer on and then put a Valspar or a Merriam or a Exalt or whatever name they have now. I'm not going to mix companies with my primers and my finishes. I don't like to do that. If there's any issues, this way I can go right back to my company and say, look, it's all your products, what's going on here, all right? So we can avoid that kind of a issue right off the bat by sticking with one company with our primers and our finishes, all right? So, all right, so let me get going. You're going to just watch me put a prime coat on these few doors. You're not going to hear me too well because I've got to put the exhaust fan on, and that's pretty loud. And I'm also going to protect my lungs. Lord knows I've done enough damage to my heart, so I don't want to mess my lungs up too. So let's get a mask on here, which I could really get away without spraying. This Kremlin system does not have a lot of overspray, and I have a really good spray booth here. I get a really good cross draft, so I don't have to worry about a lot of overspray and all. But there you go. All right, maybe you can hear me now. All right, so that's my first coat on the faces, all right? You saw me hitting, I've already hit those outside edges 3 or 4 times from the back. The edge of the material always soaks up a lot more than the faces of it, so I hit that a lot more times, all right? But this is my first coat. I'm going to be coming back again. I'm going to hit the edges again. I'm going to let this flash over for a few minutes. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to hit these inside corners again and the outside edges. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to hit everything all over again a third time. So I'm basically putting 2 full wet coats on and then multiple thinner, faster coats on my edges, all right? You see me moving much quicker when I do the edges than when I'm doing the flats, all right? I'm laying down a pretty decent, I don't know the exact mil thickness with my primers. I can measure that later, maybe we can look at that.